The year 1232 marked a tumultuous period for every nation, especially during the transformation of a fortress facing its most challenging times. Chaos and terror engulfed the province, with destruction everywhere and shattered windows and doors. The populace was in shock, unsure how to respond to the catastrophe. The Mongol presence instilled fear in the residents of a small town near the mountains, who were in desperate need of assistance. Officials abandoned their posts, leaving the common people to face the crisis alone, unwilling to risk their lives. Fires consumed people and fortresses in an instant. The older generation pleaded for restraint, but the young men, driven by determination, could not hold back, aware of their actions. An elder warned that if such actions continued, he would set the fortress ablaze, ensuring officials would never return. Immediate action was needed to extinguish the fire. The elder knew their only protection against the Mongol attackers would vanish if the officials did not come back. However, a young man pointed out that the officials had already fled long ago. The young man explained that the officials had abandoned them, indifferent to whether the Mongols killed them or not. From 1231 to 1259, the region faced relentless Mongol invasions, occurring 9 times over 30 years, forcing people to endure great hardships. The king relocated, and others managed to escape, leaving behind their lifelong homes, which burned before their eyes. The people were powerless to retaliate, lacking the means to combat the formidable Mongol army, the most powerful force of the time. Nonetheless, they believed that someday victory would be theirs, and they would overcome the invaders who had tormented them for 3 decades. They banded together to discover the key to success, aiming to defeat the Mongols who had slain their loved ones. Fortune favored them when they found something that could offer a chance for victory: copper. They tirelessly worked day and night to supply the entire army, ensuring the protection of their families and friends. The man realized that with copper, they could craft superior weapons that few could rival. They began dismantling and studying the weapons brought to them, confident that the next Mongol attack would be met with their strongest resistance yet. Armed with these weapons, people were trained and motivated to retaliate against the Mongols, determined to fight back against their tormentors. Meanwhile, storm clouds gathered and the wind picked up, howling like a high-speed car. The Mongol army's leader resembled a seasoned veteran, a powerful elder who had spent his life in military service. He rallied his forces to launch another attack on the unsuspecting villagers. As the Mongol army neared the fortress, they strategized on how to execute a perfect assault. They did not align like a typical army, but rather like one confident in their ability to conquer, having done so before. The leader rode a majestic horse revered by all, untouchable as it symbolized their king. Panic set in among the villagers at the sight of the approaching army, knowing the strength of the Mongols meant certain death for some on the battlefield. As the army drew closer, they saw the villagers gathering at the fortress, preparing for the inevitable clash. An elder from the Mongol side advanced to initiate a dialogue, likely to propose a surrender. He shouted, offering a choice: to fight or surrender, ensuring no harm would come to them if they submitted to Mongol rule. The Mongol king was pleased, knowing they had a significant numerical advantage and felt confident in winning the battle. They also knew that the fortress officials had fled long ago, fearing the Mongol attack. As the old adages stated, a sheep cannot fight wolves, perfectly describing the situation. But it was not that simple. Suddenly, an arrow flew, killing the elder and causing him to bleed in front of the entire Mongol army. The arrow nearly hit the king, risking a riot. The shot came from an ordinary archer from the fortress, a bald man skilled in martial arts, who accurately struck the elder's heart. The archer began to pray, raising his hand and closing his eyes to connect with his spiritual energy. A man wielding a huge copper sledgehammer screamed to provoke the Mongols into action. He struck the fortress to demonstrate its strength, causing small pieces to fall from it. The people rebelled, brandishing their weapons to show the Mongols they would fight to the end for their freedom. The Mongol king was displeased, knowing that even in victory, he would lose many of his men. Another arrow shot out like a bullet, speeding towards the Mongol army. The archer hit the king's horse, a sacred animal only the king could touch, signaling an unavoidable battle. The king fell from the horse, unable to control it as he bled. He recognized the archer as a devout believer in a strange god. The archer raised his hand again, expressing his faith. Enraged, the king ordered his men to kill everyone at any cost, leaving no survivors. The Mongols, enraged by the death of their sacred animal, charged into battle. They set up ladders and began scaling the walls with their heavy weapons, which were difficult to carry. However, they were immediately met by the fortress defenders, armed with expertly sharpened copper weapons, ready to retaliate. Sadly, the ground became covered with bodies and blood as both sides fought fiercely. But after the third daybreak, the defenders found some relief, despite their exhaustion, and continued to protect their weapons. The Mongol army managed to breach the wall, signaling dire consequences for the defenders. Despite their lack of strength, the defenders remained hopeful, knowing they now had the means to fight back and prove their worth. The two main leaders exchanged glances, inspiring their troops with the belief that they could overcome any foe. The leaders clashed swords, demonstrating their determination to win and claim the fortress. The battle was arduous, with each wrong move potentially deciding their fates. A powerful, resonant sound marked one side gaining the upper hand, signifying their imminent victory. Ultimately, the defenders triumphed, with the man who brought the copper defeating a formidable Mongol warrior. The Mongol king realized they could not win and ordered a retreat, accepting the heavy losses that would haunt them. The fortress was successfully defended, and the people celebrated their victory, attributing it to their durable and reliable weapons. They drove away the Mongols, who suffered significant losses, though some defenders also perished, fortunately, a small number. The people's victorious cries were so powerful that they threatened to bring down the walls, even without the Mongols' efforts. They began to sing and dance in celebration of their hard-earned victory, achieved through perseverance and skill with their weapons. That evening, there was no more battle to fight. They sat together, drinking in celebration of the victory they had long sought. As they danced and reveled, they noticed something alarming and suspicious, casting a shadow over their joy. A man in a purple suit and a strange hat rode before them on a horse, indicating he was not from the poor coalition due to his mount. Unfortunately, 20 years later, the feared event occurred, presenting problems they couldn't solve despite their efforts. The man looked suspicious, foreboding bad times ahead for the people. Carts rushed through the city where people rested, raising suspicion since they had never been seen there before. One of these newcomers approached the leader, who had successfully repelled the Mongols for a long time. The horseman looked at him with fierce, almost divine eyes, hiding something and appearing very suspicious. The man was seized, realizing that this encounter would not end well, signaling impending disaster. Though unspoken, everyone in the province sensed that something was amiss with these strangers. In 1254, in the village of Diram near Chengdu, the weather was clear and the residents were happy. The man expressed his hunger, asking if there was a place to eat for free, exhausted from carrying heavy copper. The labor of transporting the heavy metal was grueling, yet essential to their existence. They descended the mountain, which made the journey slightly easier but still very exhausting. They were desperate for food. They reached the village's old house and saw an elderly couple sitting on the porch, guarded by sentinels. One guard questioned whether they could serve such poor food to their master, deeming it unfit for a king. The old man replied that there was nothing better in the village, and despite years of diligent searching, they had found nothing else. The guard cursed them and began kicking them, making them want to vomit from the sight of the food meant for their master. Meanwhile, the old man and his lady gathered utensils for cooking and serving, watched eagerly by two girls with wide eyes. The girls observed everything, perplexed by how the guards mistreated the innocent villagers. They admired the lady near the king, noting her perfect appearance, just like a girl from a painting. The girls discussed the lady's flawless skin, wondering how she maintained it. One girl explained that the lady used powder, though they couldn't understand using it daily as it was meant for special occasions. The girl in the green suit remarked that the lady was different and probably never ran out of powder. The girls expressed their frustration, wishing they were in the ladies' place. Suddenly something caught their attention, and they noticed their friend pointing slightly to the left. They saw a couple of guys carrying enormous loads of metal on their backs. After such a long journey without food, they were still bearing a heavy burden of copper. She remarked that the guy would die if he kept carrying such a heavy load every day. His back couldn't handle it. The old man questioned who was responsible for their predicament and pointed at him. The guy retorted that blaming him was foolish, while the elder noted that if not for his actions, they would have finished their business days ago. Sanbato, a large, single-edged sword for cutting horses, was mentioned. The guy bragged that his grandfather said his swords were the best, better than thousands. The man claimed he was in charge because the old man had gone senile, causing the guy to get angry and start smoking. The elder told him to wait, suspecting they were in the wrong village due to the eerie silence and empty streets. He suggested they should go to another village, but the younger one, exhausted, dismissed it as nonsense, fearing he'd die of thirst before reaching there. The younger one shouted for water, exhausted from their long work. The elder advised him to stop disturbing the villagers, calling them idiots. He kept shouting for water, and then a bowl of crystal-clear water was thrown at him. His friend was confused, but the guy happily drank the water, feeling relieved. A girl, angry and unpleasant, watched them from behind their leader, not wanting to see anyone there. She asked who they were, pointing at the guy who was drinking water, glad to find someone there. The guy finally quenched his thirst, relieved to end the days of torment. But then the girl silenced him by putting her hand over his mouth, which the boy didn't appreciate. She told him to shut up, warning that if the provost heard their shouting, it would spell trouble, as she knew from experience. Suddenly, the ground shook as horses and hooves struck it like stones. The animal was moving at lightning speed, suggesting a rider. An adult man with a beard, wearing huge, sun-glinting armor that sparkled like a sword reflecting light, sat on a horse. He noticed the four of them and grew suspicious, realizing that the more people who knew about him, the worse it was for him. The boy asked if this was the provost the girl mentioned. She replied that he seemed older, but it was her first time seeing him. The man, surprised, asked who the provost was, assuming it was the headman. His friend clarified that he was of much higher status, like the city's mayor. The girl asked what was happening, and looked at a small estate where 5 people were standing and planning something. Then, somehow, they grabbed the guy, pointed a gun at him, and started threatening him. This led to his capture during the commotion. This man was the father of one of the girls, and she feared for his life, starting to cry at the thought of losing him. The guy, puzzled, asked why she said, "father," and they looked at him like he was an idiot disturbing everyone. She told him to stay quiet and sat on his knees to avoid being noticed, continuing to watch. The girl warned him to hide, or he'd face severe punishment if noticed by the surveillance. The commander ordered a search of the house, demanding they take everything useful. He taunted the ordinary people, suggesting they practice fencing by threatening to behead them. When the father was caught, he knew he was in a dire situation that could profoundly hurt the daughter he dearly loved and raised. The lady insisted they had nothing left, urging them to use their time elsewhere. The guard threatened to kill her if she moved. At that moment, one of the leaders struck the father's solar plexus, shouting that it was a despicable act. The father began coughing up blood, bleeding profusely from the precise blow to a vital point. The guy, unable to watch her father being beaten, shouted at the attackers, calling them worthless creatures. He then noticed the girl remained calm and didn't scream, prompting him to ask if this was really her father, given his suffering. Her friend grabbed his shirt, yelling that he was an idiot who didn't understand anything. She explained that if the girl intervened, it would only worsen the situation. She questioned if they were just standing there because they enjoyed watching and crying. The eldest called his brother to leave and not disturb them. The next day he wanted to help, but failed. The elder reminded them not to interfere in others' problems, warning of severe consequences if they disrupted fate. Guai realized his friend was right. Meddling in others' affairs would bring great suffering. One of the intruders found a chicken he held by the paws. The lady pleaded that it was her fault and begged them to release her husband. The crowd remarked that if they were being deceived, it meant their leader was also being deceived. As a result, he threw the woman aside and aimed his blades at the man's head. The swordsman declared he would ensure the man wouldn't repeat his actions, while the girl's father pleaded for mercy. The girl was unable to bear the sight and began to cry, realizing that her father was on the verge of death before her eyes. Another friend of mine tried to endure the situation and yelled that the elders resembled scarecrows and needed to stop immediately. The man looked around and noticed the unfolding events were intriguing. Despite not taking any action, he was eager to get involved. One of the onlookers asked her who she was and questioned why she would say such derogatory things about him. He cursed the girl and advanced toward her, tossing the chicken aside as he intended to slit her throat. Realizing she was about to be killed, she cried out to the man for assistance in her dire situation. He was taken aback by her plea, wondering why he should help her after she had previously sent him away. The girl begged for his help as he was about to swing his weapon, intending to cut her throat in front of everyone. However, he recalled his commander's orders to avoid intervening in the disputes of others to prevent similar repercussions. The man, enraged, was ready to break all her bones, insisting that she had no right to treat him so disrespectfully. As she faced the imminent threat of death, an unexpected miracle occurred, surprising everyone, including the man himself. The swordsman managed to strike the arrogant attacker, sending him flying. The girl was spared and survived despite the grave situation. The onlookers were stunned, unable to comprehend how such an outcome was possible, given that the attacker was one of their most skilled fighters. The guy's friend realized that witnessing the event firsthand would undoubtedly leave him feeling bad. It was clear that the situation was far from resolved, and he understood that action was necessary. The girl looked into his eyes and saw that he was capable of defending her in front of a large crowd, which meant he would likely be killed for daring to attack one of the guards. Others recognized the need to quickly resolve the situation and capture the person who had assaulted their ally. One of the armed men warned that if the person didn't immediately apologize, his sword would administer justice. The man swung at his opponent, who then climbed over the fence, possibly to regroup or plan another move. It seemed like a battle was imminent. The man touched his sword and dismissed it as mere decoration, claiming it was nothing more than a useless trinket. He then began to act. He swung at his opponent, declaring that he had no right to insult his weapon, which had been crucial in many battles. However, the man managed to catch the blades with one hand without suffering a cut, as if he was handling a mere toy. The onlookers were stunned, unable to comprehend how he could grasp the sword with one hand without being injured. The man began to exert pressure in a way that would cause the maximum discomfort and pain, aiming to inflict the most unpleasant experience on his opponent. He gripped the sword with such force that it snapped in two right before everyone's eyes. The spectators were baffled by how he could break the iron with one hand. The sword, now broken, seemed to grin as if it were aware of the unexpected feat. It was unheard of for anyone in the village to break iron with their bare hands. The man began to panic, unable to understand how his trusted sword, which had always been his battle companion, could be shattered so easily. Meanwhile, someone on horseback was racing down the mountain, having noticed strange occurrences below and hearing unusual sounds coming from that direction. They accelerated to catch up and reach their destination, each carrying their weapons in hand. One person asked another if he was completely certain their leader was in the very village they were heading towards. He found it hard to believe that they had traveled all this way just for a hunt, sensing that something was amiss. He urged them to hurry, stressing that they needed to ensure the safety of their charge, warning of severe consequences if they failed. When they arrived in the deserted village, they slowed down. Normally, villagers would be out and about, interacting in the streets. They began to feel uneasy, noting that even the animals seemed unsettled. It felt as if everything was conspiring against them. He looked around, trying to understand why the village was so empty and why there was no one in sight. Then he heard someone yelling, "Idiot!" Clearly, this person was engaged in a conversation, as there were no other voices around. He overheard a conversation where someone was criticizing the sword as a mere toy and questioning why it wasn't properly sharpened, which infuriated the warrior. He asked if this was the reason the sword broke so easily, pointing at the man and loudly complaining about the destruction of his prized weapon. The man responded, telling him he was speaking nonsense and instructed him to gather the fools who were with him. Then, someone declared that this was unacceptable and drew their weapon. This was the person who had come in pursuit of the head. The warrior addressed the person as a young master, implying he was the provost's son, and questioned who else was present and their purpose. Aware of the important person behind him, the warrior called the man a miserable worm for daring to break his weapon. The man explained that the young master was Ozawa, the son of the provost, a respected figure in the village known for his bravery and leadership of the army. The man was confused because the young master's surname was Choi, while his father's surname was Choi. This discrepancy made him nervous that the warrior might reprimand him severely. Another person told the man to shut his mouth and stay silent, threatening him with death if he spoke again. However, the provost's son intervened, telling him to stop. The provost's son said that the man shouldn't bark at a dog in response, publicly humiliating him for his previous loud behavior. They continued to the headman's residence, where he had lived for many years, and the weather remained pleasant. The man bowed and wanted to express his long-standing frustrations and unhappiness, feeling unsettled even in this moment. He lowered his head, contemplating how to address and change the situation that had troubled him for so long, seeking peace. As he bowed before the headman asked if he had come from the fortress about which there were many rumors. The man identified himself as Lieutenant General Cho Jack Chan, continuing to keep his head bowed in respect. The headman acknowledged this, but inquired about his purpose for visiting. The lieutenant explained that he had been ordered by the general of the defensive army to escort him to the fortress. The army assigned to the fortress and other key locations during the Goryeo dynasty was critical for defending against invasions. The king was concerned and unsure of the best course of action. The headman told him that the Mongols were nearing and that he needed to hurry to the fortress to calm the people, warning that otherwise a riot could lead to nationwide chaos. His girlfriend mentioned that he was experiencing back and stomach pain and needed to rest. She hoped he would stay put and not go anywhere. The lieutenant emphasized the urgent need for Mr. Choi Jun-kyung's name to address the crisis and save the people from impending disaster. He instructed him to move back and stay put, as he had no intention of leaving his position since it was too far from the fortress. The lieutenant was greatly astonished, staring at him as if witnessing a miracle, his expression showing utter disbelief. He stood up and bowed, urging the gentleman to follow his own path. He couldn't understand why the man refused to go with him, as it seemed pointless and could potentially incite a riot. He stepped out from behind the gate, uncertain of what would happen next. If a bloodshed occurred, it would lead to widespread suffering and diminish the unity of the people. He then noticed something in the bags that deeply outraged him, given his experience and understanding of what was appropriate. He saw 2 horses and 5 people departing with large quantities of items. Observing them, he realized that the items did not seem to be necessary for their usual purposes. The lieutenant understood that the king was not equipped with the hunting gear typically required for pursuing animals. It seemed he had deduced that the headman intended to escape to a nearby island to find refuge once the Mongols arrived. He noticed a group of people gathered in one spot, engaged in some activity that caught the old man's attention. Everyone was gathered to witness how the provost's son would face the man who had shattered a sword with his bare hands. The man, irritated by being called a dog, joked that he would regret it if the dog bit him. The provost's son remained silent, showing wisdom similar to his father's, and paused thoughtfully in response. The man waved his hand, suggesting they delay the battle, as their quarrel was merely over trivial matters. The king's son was infuriated and became deeply concerned about the meaning behind the strange man's actions. He asked for a moment to fetch a sword for a proper fight, which bewildered his opponent, who looked at him as if he were foolish. The request irritated him further, as he was eager to engage in combat without the added risk of dying unnecessarily. The provost's son began to shout, calling him a degenerate, and swung his sword with the intent to kill him just as he had done with the previous warrior. Everyone knew that the man was doomed because the provost's son was extremely strong, and they anticipated witnessing another senseless death. The provost's son swung at him, narrowly missing his head, but the man managed to dodge the attack due to his agility on the ground. It was an impressive feat, and the provost's son was determined to tear him apart for his audacity in front of the crowd. Realizing that a single strike wouldn't suffice, the man quickly considered how to defend himself against such a fast and powerful opponent, knowing he could no longer rely on breaking swords. He countered with a fragment of a sword provided by another warrior, using it as a weapon to fight the provost's son. Despite his refusal to back down and his attempt to defend his honor, he received a cut on his shoulder from the piece of debris. The man withdrew the weapon, claiming it had almost succeeded. He relished the feeling of power and victory over the young fighter. The provost's son realized how dire the situation could have been if the sword hadn't been damaged. He might have lost his head and bled out. The man mentioned that if the fight had lasted a bit longer, he would have had to struggle to survive. Suddenly, the man became furious, speaking nonsense, and demanded that the young master forgive him, humiliating himself by placing his mouth to the ground. Maki questioned what was happening and how the man dared to touch him, especially in such a degrading manner in front of everyone. The elder explained to the young master that the boy had clearly led a sheltered life and was unfamiliar with proper etiquette. He again asked for forgiveness on the boy's behalf. The argument escalated, with the younger one calling the elder a hillbilly, which infuriated the elder, who retaliated by calling him a boy. Their quarrel intensified, with the younger one threatening to tear out the elder's tongue and use it to create a device for a strong flow if he was called a booger again. The provost's son called them bastards and warned they would pay for their behavior. He also told them to quiet down, as their noise was irritating everyone. Sand suddenly began to fall on his face, obscuring his vision. It seemed like a diversion to facilitate their escape and ensure their safety. As he wondered about the situation, they didn't rush forward, aiming instead to create enough distance from the nearby army. Panic spread among the onlookers as they witnessed what had happened to the provost's son, something no one had seen before. The man shouted that they needed to flee, and his older companion urged him to run faster and not get distracted by trivial matters. They fled and encountered the same man who had previously gone to ask the main gentleman to come to the fortress. The man yelled at them and drew his sword, threatening to cut their throats for their actions and the tricks they had played. The boy dashed alongside him, realizing that if he didn't keep up, he would lose all hope in his current situation. The man swung his weapon, but the boy skillfully evaded his strikes, leaving the man bewildered by the boy's ability to dodge such powerful blows. The man stood in shock, unable to comprehend how the young man could avoid his legendary attack, which he had perfected over a decade. They continued to flee, and the elder could only watch, unable to intervene due to his heavy armor, which hindered his mobility. The elder criticized the young man for getting into a fight, while his friends explained that he had no other choice but to fight to escape. The elder insisted that he needed to flee to save his life, as their chances of survival in the village were slim. As they ran, the younger one heard something and stopped to determine who was calling them and why. It was the girl he had rescued, shouting for him to come to her immediately to help them escape from the king's forces. She urged them to follow her, claiming she knew the area better than anyone else, having lived there her whole life. They quickly turned the corner, trying to figure out how to escape the perilous situation they found themselves in. The girl handed them robes, instructing them to put them on quickly to disguise themselves and take a brief respite without exhausting their energy. The boy questioned whether the robes were women's clothing, but she replied that she had nothing else available and urged him to move if he wanted to blend in as a girl. They proceeded through the village, heading toward the river, while the townspeople sought the two men who had attacked the provost's son, though no one had taken action. The townspeople rushed around frantically following orders, while the boys, dressed as women, walked cautiously as if they were young girls. One warrior became suspicious, noticing their unusual appearance and the oddly feminine shoes they wore. He questioned them about their identities and why they were hiding behind the plates they carried near their heads, wanting to identify them, as they were unfamiliar. The provost's son took an interest and looked to see who these ladies were, noting that their disguise wasn't very convincing. The girls claimed they were merely food servers for the master and needed help, thus calling their friends for assistance. The warrior questioned their truthfulness, wondering if they were deceiving him, as there were 2 fugitives who needed to be captured and executed. He asked the girl if she had seen 2 suspicious individuals, and she replied that she hadn't, apologizing for any inconvenience. This response made the patrolman uneasy, as he couldn't determine where the fugitives had gone. As they followed the provost's son, the girl sighed, knowing she would be considered an accomplice for hiding the dangerous criminals in the area. The men commented on how the thieves had escaped quickly, with one praising their strength, noting that they appeared very formidable. The patrolman questioned what was meant by strength, pointing out that the thieves fled immediately upon seeing the young master, presumably believing they couldn't compete with him. He continued to praise his leader, stating that if it came to a fight, the young master would easily defeat the thieves, highlighting his impressive reputation. The man continued, mentioning that one of the thieves had called the other a boor to save himself, when suddenly a hand reached from behind. Someone grabbed him by the neck and forcefully pulled him back, preparing to punish him for the remarks he had made about the others. It was a younger man who had removed his suit and was furious that they spoke about him behind his back, but never to his face. He wasn't intimidated and threw the guard into the air. He challenged the master to fight him again, piquing the young master's interest as he eyed him like prey. The son drew his sword for a fair fight, understanding that this would allow him to defend his honor and demonstrate his unmatched skills. He declared that the fool had sealed his own fate and stood ready with his sword, which glinted in the sunlight. Another person commented that the young master was offering a chance to fight him honestly, one-on-one, for all to see who the true victor would be. They stared each other down as if they were the world's greatest adversaries, with each placing immense value on their reputation and dignity. The elder realized that he was likely to lose to the young master quickly, and if not, the local authorities would execute him anyway. The younger man turned around to hear his friend calling him an idiot, which only fueled his anger. It stung that someone close to him had so little faith in him. The 3 captives remained silent like fish, aware that it was best to keep quiet around someone wielding a weapon. He feared that if he didn't win the fight, his friends would suffer as a result. Their fate would be sealed, regardless of his actions. As night fell, they were all captured and brought before the master to face judgment for attacking the young master, who was destined for the throne. They were beaten and sat by the fire, realizing they were in a dire situation with little chance of escape, though they clung to a faint hope. The man whose sword had been broken ordered him to stay still and not move, stepping on him with his new weapon. This infuriated the younger man, feeling helpless and demeaned as if he were nothing more than a mere creature. With the weapon pressed against his face, he knew he had to act cautiously, or he would pay with his life for his actions. The man felt a surge of satisfaction, reveling in the strength of his new weapon, having once been defeated by the same person, now subdued before him. The master observed the scene, deep in thought. Having already dealt with Mongol troubles, he now faced the additional issue of these 2 intruders. He ordered their execution, valuing his son more than anything, as children are the most precious part of life. The man was eager to use his new blade to kill them, ready to swing and claim their lives, feeling a grim satisfaction. Holding the sword high, he shouted for them to die, knowing how dire their situation would become if they managed to escape their bonds. The girl cried out in alarm, her feelings clear as she had grown fond of him, especially since he had previously saved her life from the same person. The sword descended swiftly, poised to decapitate those who had ventured into new territories. He felt an overwhelming fear of death unlike anything he had ever experienced as he faced imminent execution. Just as the sword was about to strike, a saber appeared, intercepting the blow and preventing it from reaching his head. The master's subordinate was furious when he saw his strike blocked by an old man, who had previously requested the master's help but was now defending the youths who had attacked his son. The master demanded to know why his orders were not being followed, and why the old man was protecting those who had harmed his son. The old man knelt and explained that they needed to be interrogated first to uncover any valuable information they might possess. The lady urged the lieutenant general to stop defying the master's orders, which were to execute them, and not to challenge the master's authority. The old man began discussing the giant fortress, and the young man's immediate reaction revealed he had knowledge about it, raising suspicion. The old man inquired if he had any information about the fortress, to which the young man responded affirmatively, saying he was on his way there. This revelation astonished the old man, who believed that if he had truly been traveling there, he would have encountered Mongols and not survived. He had been at the fortress since morning and had not seen any Mongols, remaining with his friend the entire time. The old man began to reconsider the situation, realizing that the Mongols might be executing a strategic plan to intimidate them. The young man suggested that the Mongols must be preoccupied with besieging the fortress, possibly planning an unexpected attack to secure it. His remarks puzzled everyone, as they struggled to understand how someone with his background could have such knowledge. He was taken aback by their reaction and wondered if no one had been aware of this information before his arrival. One of the dissenters accused him of lying, claiming that his statements were merely attempts to deceive and gain advantage. The old man began to consider the possibility that the information could indeed be a ploy to mislead them, potentially causing confusion with little effort. The old man instructed everyone to examine the weapons they carried, which appeared suspicious for ordinary travelers, suggesting a deeper purpose. Facing a sword at his neck, the young man realized he needed a convincing excuse to avoid execution. Under pressure, he explained that they were being taken to the fortress to aid in its defense against the Mongols, which seemed evident to him. He claimed they were blacksmiths from a nearby workshop, aiming to assist their homeland and protect it from enemies. The gentleman began to question the credibility of his rapidly changing story, suggesting that his information might be false. The girl's action of climbing over the fence implied a potential opportunity to save many lives with their weapons. The gravity of the situation weighed on him, recognizing that any mistake could have dire consequences for the entire population. Frustrated and eager to end the matter, the man was determined to execute them quickly, holding a grudge over the broken weapon. Unable to contain his anger, he declared that the young man was clearly not a blacksmith and had no right to deceive them, before swinging his fist at him. The girl intervened, demanding that he stop acting so irrationally. She accused him of being a clueless fool who failed to grasp the gravity of the situation. She stood her ground, and he yelled at her to move, calling her a foolish girl blocking his way. This infuriated the bound man, who threatened to retaliate if the girl was harmed. The man was bewildered by his audacity, given his precarious position with death imminent. The commander decided to take a break to ponder the situation further and return to address it later. The girl tried to communicate something important to the gentleman, expressing her admiration and concern for the young man. The gentleman ignored her and entered the room, dismissing her as irrelevant while the old man considered her words. The old man ordered the prisoners to be locked up. The executioner, displeased with this change, argued but was instructed to follow orders and handle them the next day, as morning often brings clarity. The general insisted on locking them up for the night and addressing their fate more thoroughly in the morning, believing that time would bring better judgment. The tied-up man resigned himself to whatever fate awaited them, whether it was death or imprisonment. He began shouting, mocking the situation and the way they were being treated, hoping to provoke an emotional response since he had nothing to lose. He noted that their fate was at the mercy of the master's whims, which seemed to drive his point home. At that moment, blood began to flow, intensifying the situation. Annoyed by his continued defiance, the man struck him forcefully, demanding that he be quiet and stop provoking him. The guy realized he had finally faced the consequences of his defiance, suffering from the blows and the blood streaming from his nose, which made it hard for him to remain conscious. As he struggled to keep his eyes open, he noticed a massive crowd around him. Their conditions seemed to worsen by the second, prompting him to close his eyes. The last thing he heard was the man shouting for them to be removed from the scene. Outside, the air had turned cold and dark, with the sun having long since set. A thin fog made it uninviting to venture out. The son spoke to his father, confirming that the fortress was indeed under siege and that the imprisoned individuals had spoken the truth. The son realized he needed to accompany them to ensure his parents' safety, whom he cherished deeply. The gentleman recognized the necessity of making sacrifices and accompanying his son to the fortress to defend it from the Mongols, though he was also contemplating leaving. The son suggested returning home immediately to gather troops and send them to defend the fortress, citing the danger of staying. The father inquired about the son's mother, his stepmother, whom he neither respected nor valued due to her behavior, only appreciating her for her youth. The son felt uncomfortable with his father's words, sensing that the lack of a complete family was causing friction between them. The father expressed gratitude for his son's concern, but insisted he should leave. Despite this, the son urged the gentleman to listen to him. The father, frustrated, ordered his son to leave and cast an unpleasant look reminiscent of the lady he once loved. He slammed the door in his son's face, clearly indicating his dissatisfaction with the ongoing family dynamics. The son understood that his relationship with his father was strained and challenging, recognizing that despite his father's love, their differing interests and his mother's presence created a difficult dynamic. He felt a deep unease and a pain in his eyes that was difficult to articulate. He felt like an outcast, torn between two choices of where to live, but unable to decide on either. Meanwhile, the guards ensured that the two prisoners remained securely confined in the shed where they were being held. The girl, who had developed feelings for the younger man, was constantly pondering how she could reach them and free them from their imprisonment. The two prisoners sat in the shed, surrounded by hay, with the younger one desperately trying to chew through the ropes to escape their predicament. The older man questioned why the younger had interfered, suggesting that their lives might have been more peaceful otherwise. The younger replied that he couldn't stand to see their situation. The older man remarked that just as different metals have different melting points, people also have different social statuses. The younger man retorted, saying that he was already dealing with enough trouble, and criticized the older man for his ineptitude in collecting garbage. They began to argue, with the older man calling the younger a foolish bumpkin who needed more milk, and the younger man calling him a guinea pig. Their argument was interrupted when they saw the doors start to open and someone entered the shed where they were held. They were initially surprised, as they didn't understand how someone could gain access to them without the master's authorization. It was the same girl who indicated that they needed to remain quiet and assured them that she could help them escape. As night fell and a new day began, the birds sang joyfully and the weather was perfect for a fresh start. She brought them food and commented on their hunger, noting that they looked like pigs fed a meager amount of porridge. The younger man introduced himself, apologizing for not doing so earlier. He gave his name as Guai, while the girl identified herself as Dao Bi, mentioning that they had previously encountered her friend, Censure. The girl expressed her sincere apologies, feeling regretful for having called him stupid, which had led to the current situation. The guy reassured her that it was fine, but she insisted that her actions had almost led to his death. Desperate, the guy asked her to help him escape as he was bound by ropes and unable to move. Suddenly, someone burst into the shed, shouting insults and threats. It was the man who had previously threatened to kill them, declaring that they would die today. Panic set in as the girl hurried to untie the prisoners, who had been locked up under the provost's orders. The man looked disheveled, with a large black eye, a testament to his earlier confrontation. His condition worsened, his vision blurred, and he struggled to maintain control. He collapsed on the ground, dropping his weapon and lying face down in the dirt, which was filthy from the pigs that had been in the shed before their arrival. Outside, people were shouting in alarm, reporting that the Mongols were attacking. Panic spread as everyone realized the severity of the situation. The Mongols showed no mercy, killing civilians and destroying everything the villagers had worked for years to build. Armed with weapons specially sharpened for this assault, the Mongols wreaked havoc as the old man had warned. The Mongols slaughtered people and set fire to everything in sight, reveling in their destruction and chaos. The girl thought of her beloved friend and knew she needed to help, especially since her father and mother had been killed. The guy asked her to free him first, believing that his friend could fend for herself while he needed to be untied to help. The girl glanced around and realized she had to move quickly, as the man intent on killing them had been struck by an arrow, causing chaos as people fled in terror. Confronted with the certainty of death, the man who had been hit by the arrow started to ignite, and his body was consumed by flames, burning away completely before the eyes of the onlookers in a manner that was anything but human. The two of them were bound and sitting helplessly, unsure of what to do next, as their situation seemed to be leading them toward their imminent end. They dashed forward as if pursued by a pack of wolves. Despite being restrained, they understood the urgency of keeping on the move despite the hindrance. The guy yelled for her to look around, warning her of the extreme danger of staying there. He specifically instructed her to glance back. He managed to shield her by pushing her aside, avoiding the trajectory of the incoming arrow, giving her a chance to survive. Suddenly, the feared Mongol appeared before them, armed with a dangerously sharp weapon. The guy realized he was in a dire predicament. With no nearby weapon and being tied up, his chances of fighting back were severely limited. He began evading the Mongols' attacks with skill, narrowly avoiding blows aimed at his head and throat. He quickly assessed all the techniques he knew and selected the most effective one to try to save himself. The Mongol continued to wear him down with precise strikes near his body, while the guy twisted and turned like an acrobat to avoid being hit. Guai did everything in his power but knew he couldn't last much longer. He urgently needed to free himself from the ropes to escape. He knelt and declared that it was now his turn to take the hits for her. Despite being restrained, the guy decided to counterattack. Guai surged forward to deliver the retaliation the Mongol deserved, feeling that the invader had no right to intrude on their territory. He charged at a Mongol wielding a weapon with remarkable bravery and courage, knowing he had no other option. One misstep could mean death. The girl was deeply concerned about Guai amidst the chaos. All she could see were explosions and confusion. His friend urgently shouted at her to free him so he could assist his brother and she could help her friend. However, something unsettled him, causing him to glance around in confusion. He realized that danger was imminent, and they needed to remain vigilant. He saw a Mongol behind the girl aiming a bow at her and understood that she could not be allowed to die. He shouted a warning and leaped to intercept the arrow, taking the hit himself and knocking the girl to safety. As she watched him succumb, she asked how he felt and what she should do, but he could only writhe in agony, knowing he wouldn't survive. Finally, little brother managed to escape the battle with the Mongol, though he had no real advantage due to being completely bound. Nevertheless, he managed to obtain a sword. The guy began to worry about the whereabouts of his friend and the girl who had been with him, sensing something was amiss. He noticed the head of the Mongols and his son trying to flee the village, which seemed unusual to him. He heard someone in the crowd shouting insults to draw attention, calling them rotten bastards. He pointed his sword at them, accusing them of fleeing to protect their own interests while disregarding the welfare of others, as was their usual behavior. Then a spear was hurled at his son, but he managed to deflect the attack with his sword. The son ordered the guards to immediately escort Mr. Provost to safety, given the extreme danger present. He hurried with his guards through the bullets and shells, eager to reach their destination, where they hoped for a safer environment. Unexpectedly, the head's son was attacked by a Mongol wielding a sword, a situation no one anticipated since the royal family expected to reach safety without further incident. The guy realized he needed to defend himself and seize this moment to prove to the upstart that he was a capable fighter. Assessing the situation accurately, he decapitated the Mongol, ensuring he could no longer advance, and was left bleeding on the ground. This event didn't faze the head son, who knew he was capable of much more than others believed. Guai observed him and understood the situation. He realized he had underestimated the strength of his opponent, who was indeed formidable. The head's son accused the guy of being arrogant, seeing nothing but his own failures in the world. The guy responded that he was impudent and asked if he was all right, asserting his readiness to fight, as he had previously offered. The man on horseback called the guy an idiot lacking in justice, but he invited him to fight, not wanting to miss out on the opportunity for battle. Guai remarked on the beating he was receiving and turned to see a horrific sight he had momentarily forgotten. Behind him was a multitude of people suffering from the Mongols' severe attacks, unable to defend themselves. The guy couldn't understand why they weren't taking action. They needed to grasp the weapons and engage in battle to prove their superiority. He shouted that they risked death and needed to fight together to have any chance of winning, but the people claimed they didn't know how to fight. The guy urged them not to delay, but at that moment, a noose was thrown over his head, signaling his imminent execution. This was the same Mongol who had killed his brother. He seized him by the neck and dragged him along the ground, finding amusement in his actions, since he was mounted on a horse. He was thrilled to have captured such a large prey and hoped to strangle him with his rope, which he had been eagerly anticipating. However, things didn't go as planned. Realizing his impending death, the man struggled desperately to free himself from the rope in a bid to survive. He pushed against the ground, trying to control the rope as if he were taming a bull caught by it. His legs began to burn from the speed of the horse, which was galloping rapidly while he was only wearing simple boots. This situation displeased the Mongol, whose eyes widened in shock. He was accustomed to people being unable to escape once caught in a noose, and now the man was gaining control. He fled, declaring that if he could regain control, everything would start to flourish and improve. He also boasted that he could run faster than a horse, just as he had claimed earlier. He sprinted like a beast, managing to overtake the Mongol who had been controlling him with the rope. He thrust his fist forward, signaling that the Mongol was about to receive a powerful blow that would be inescapable. He knocked the mustached Mongol off the cart, leaving the horse to run free while the Mongol lay on the ground, having skidded through meters of sand. The man also enjoyed the moment, as the horse, now unburdened, began to speed up without any additional weight. Eventually, the rope snapped, and he crashed into a tree, causing him significant injuries and intense pain throughout his body. Finally, everything settled down. Exhausted and emotionless, he lay beneath the tree. Then he heard someone calling him a warrior from behind, and he was puzzled as to why he was being addressed that way. The people he had summoned for help thanked him for his bravery and for saving their lives, despite feeling they hardly deserved it after having previously abandoned him. Guai asked if they were referring to him, and when they confirmed that they were, they hailed him as their savior, who had rescued them from the Mongols. Iwai was amused and pleased to be called a warrior. He wiped his nose with satisfaction and laughed at the situation. However, he was soon reminded that he hadn't come alone, but with his brother, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. The battle made him realize the urgency of finding him. Feeling disheartened, he understood there was no time to waste. He inquired about where everyone was hiding because he needed crucial information. Meanwhile, the sun raced higher as the Mongols had burned everything in the village to the ground. He noticed something odd. His father was washing in a different place than initially planned. He sped up to catch up with them and understand their actions and new direction since their path had changed. The son finally grasped that his father was not going to pass on their family's legacy. Consequently, he knew he had to continue living modestly. He realized that if he wanted to prove himself, he couldn't afford to run away without a military record. He turned his horse around, knowing he needed to undertake the tasks his father had been too fearful to tackle over the years. Despite becoming a provost himself, the son of the chief sighed, acknowledging that taking on this challenge carried significant risks and could potentially lead to his death. He observed the destruction in his village, the place where he had spent his entire life, now burning as if deserted. Yet he felt compelled to prove himself capable of more than his father, who had merely fled. He steeled himself, determined to face the challenge ahead. Meanwhile, the Mongol managed to kill the brother of the man who had barely survived being struck by a pillar. Next, he intended to take the girl who had witnessed everything. She yelled in Mongolian for him not to approach, which made the Mongol realize that she was highly intelligent and educated, making it foolish to lose such a valuable asset. The Mongols were astonished by her words, as they hadn't expected anyone in the village to speak their language. That evening, the Mongol planned to capture the villagers' children and raise new Mongols. The Mongol, puzzled, asked how she could speak his language. She knew she had to keep him talking to buy time, as otherwise she would face immediate death. The older friend could barely speak due to severe bleeding, and no one was available to help him at that moment. It was heartbreaking because he had sacrificed himself for the girl. The Mongol, who was perverted, confessed that he actually liked her, but she refused to engage with him, calling him a wicked thief who made her anxious. The pervert said he would spare her life until evening, revealing his interest was solely physical. However, just then, the Mongol was attacked from behind by an old man who had been trying to keep them safe. The girls embraced each other, expressing their gratitude to the lieutenant general, who knew he had to shoulder the entire responsibility since the provost had fled. The old man urged them to move quickly as their chance of survival was slipping away. As they fled, arrows flew around them, and they struggled to figure out how to navigate the perilous situation, knowing that one wrong move could be fatal. They spotted two Mongols on horseback, ready to kill them simply because they were there. They wondered what the Mongols' intentions were in this situation. They realized the Mongols were blocking their path and urgently needed a plan to survive. Without one, they wouldn't make it out of this dire situation. One Mongol asked his companion if he should kill them, and the one with pigtails instructed him to finish them off immediately. The old man understood they weren't joking and knew they had to act fast, or they would be left bleeding and unable to escape. The man dismounted his horse, indicating that he could quickly deal with them and celebrate his victory in the new village. He brandished his saber and challenged them to fight for their lives like true warriors. The old man charged into battle, as he was their only protector, and offered his saber to the man, hoping to end the fight and escape the village. Sparks flew from the clash of their blades, each fighter demonstrating their strength and resilience in the tough battle. The old man realized his opponent was quite formidable, and he hadn't anticipated such a strong Mongol fighter. The Mongol, confident and mocking, laughed at him, believing he could prove his superiority by killing the old man. The Mongol expertly exploited the situation, landing a blade strike to the old man's stomach, piercing through his armor. The old man felt the impending death and agony, screaming in pain that was beyond description. He collapsed to the ground, while the Mongol stood victorious, his blade proving its lethal effectiveness. The girls, anxious and alone without their defender, were unsure what to do amidst the ongoing chaos and conflict in the streets. The Mongols prepared to behead the old man, positioning their blade close to his head, ready to deliver the final blow. The girl cried out, begging for mercy, acknowledging that his sacrifice to protect them was the reason he had stayed and ultimately lost his life. At that moment, someone shouted from behind the Mongols, distracting the man who was about to deliver the fatal blow. This interruption prevented him from striking. The newcomer arrived just in time to save them, knowing that if he had been even a minute later, the old man would have been dead. He challenged the Mongol to leave the old man alone and face him instead, asserting that a fight between them would be a fair contest. He lunged at the Mongol, demanding a one-on-one fight, claiming they were evenly matched in strength. Guai laughed, confident that he was close to winning and could save everyone thanks to his superior strength and skill. The Mongol realized he was under intense pressure and had to act quickly to avoid losing, or he wouldn't be able to claim victory. The girl, worried for him, urged him to be cautious, expressing that she had admired him from the moment she saw him. The man declared that he would deliver the death the Mongols deserved, finally meeting their end. However, the Mongol managed another strike, shattering his sword into 2 pieces, an outcome he had not anticipated as he had envisioned saving everyone. He stood stunned, unable to comprehend how his sword had failed and how they had managed to defend themselves with such weak weapons. He commented that the sword was inadequate, as the Mongol continued to assault him relentlessly, causing him to panic and feel helpless. The old man warned him to be careful, noting that a wrong move could result in the Mongol beheading him, just as he had almost done to the old man. The Mongol pushed Guai against the wall, leaving him in a precarious position with no clear path forward or backward. He saw the Mongol brandishing his sword close to his face, a clear message that the invaders were well equipped and not to be underestimated. The Mongol began to swing his sword to finish off the man, who was becoming a nuisance and preventing him from dealing with the old man protecting the girl. He realized he was about to leave this world he had grown fond of, despite the hard work he had put in every day. As the sword came flying toward him, he tried to block it with his hand, a tactic he had used before with other weapons. The girl heard the sound and couldn't bear to watch. She closed her eyes, knowing that the man's hands, and possibly his limbs, were at risk of being severed. He feared he would lose his left hand, or worse, but then Provost's son arrived to help and offered his blade. The girl was overjoyed that he had survived and called out his name in relief, confident that he was now under the protection of the strong and skilled son of the Provost. The man, now pinned against the wall, remarked that he had been hit, not the Mongol, and thus didn't feel the need to thank him for the assistance. The Mongol continued to battle with the Provost's son, who intervened to prevent him from defeating the second villager. The son of the Provost faced him with confidence and bravery, knowing that if he won and returned Khan to the village, he would be appointed as the new Provost. He questioned why he should be thanked for saving his life, stating that the sword would have struck if someone hadn't intervened. The Mongol struggled to withstand the young man's powerful attacks, realizing he was losing control of the situation. The man began to sweat from the intense pressure, feeling overwhelmed for the first time, as he had previously only fought in training. Gua told him that if he didn't know how to fight properly, he should step aside and not interfere with a professional who could handle the situation at the highest level. The old man noticed that Provost's son had stayed behind, which meant the king was unguarded and could be easily killed. The man struggled to endure the relentless attacks and was also weighed down by his moral obligations, especially after the old man's words. He barely managed to hold on and glanced to his left, where he saw something intriguing, or rather, someone. The girl, who had lost her parents due to their secrecy about food and rural activities, watched the scene unfold. He urged the girl to leave if she wanted to avoid death, as the rest of the Mongols were soon to arrive, and he could no longer hold them back. The girl, feeling uneasy, approached him and, confused, reached out to his face, sensing that something significant was happening. The old man warned everyone to flee as they were about to be overwhelmed. The girls begged the general to join them, but he, wounded, told them not to worry about him. They lifted the old man and began to carry him, urging the man to hurry so they could escape together from the chaos. The girl wondered where he had gone, as he had been fighting the Mongol who injured the old man, leaving him bleeding and unable to walk on his own. The old man urged her to move quickly, as any delay would allow the Mongols to attack them before they could escape. The man, lying in his own blood, saw them leaving without him. He realized it was too late to ask for their help, even though he had sacrificed himself to save the girl. The bald Mongol recognized the man's skill and knew he would need to exert significant effort to defeat him or risk losing his own life. He instructed his friend with hair to follow the 3 escaping, while he kept the Mongols' attention on himself. The girl noticed they had to hurry as a man on horseback was pursuing them, threatening potentially dire consequences. As they moved forward, they saw everything burning around them. The girl assisted the old man, who was unable to move properly on his own. She urged him to hurry, emphasizing that even a moment's delay could mean their survival was at risk amidst the chaos. A Mongol on horseback pursued them, visibly enraged because his friend was engaged in battle with the man, which might have repercussions for him. The Mongol increased his speed, knowing his friend would only be safe if he could capture hostages. The man searched through the weapons for his sword, essential for him to fight effectively, as he was renowned as one of the best blacksmiths. His frustration grew as he failed to find it, his eyes burning with anger and desperation as he turned to the weapon he had hoped to recover. Unable to locate his sword, his frustration intensified. He threw every metal object aside, unable to contain his anxiety over the missing weapon. Amidst his searching, he noticed something lying on the ground, wrapped in something which puzzled him greatly. Meanwhile, the old man was struck by an unexpected arrow in the back, causing him significant pain. The girls panicked, fearful of continuing without the old man, as losing such a powerful protector could jeopardize their chances in the battle. The Mongol on horseback aimed at his next target, growing increasingly frustrated that his friend was not there with him. The old man, in pain, realized he would not be able to continue with them and would die defending his homeland. The girl cried out for help, as besides the old man, the only other person with her was her friend, who lacked strength in combat. As the bald Mongol prepared to shoot, he was startled by a figure challenging him, not understanding who would dare to confront him while he was armed. It was Gwai, appearing almost like a cyborg, his muscular physique signaling his readiness for victory and an unprecedented level of confidence. Gwai smiled and gestured for the Mongols to come and face him in a one-on-one duel, insisting they leave the ladies and the old man alone. The Mongols fired an arrow, hoping to quickly eliminate Gwai and ensure he wouldn't interfere with their battle. Luckily, Gwai managed to block the arrow with a stick, although he was frightened and anxious about the possibility of being hit. Gwai yelled at the Mongol, calling him an idiot, and pulled out the arrow. His rage was intense, and he was determined to punish the Mongol for his aggression. Realizing he needed to end the fight decisively, Gwai began to draw his legendary sword, known for its ability to defeat numerous foes. As he unwrapped it, the thread came loose from his cloak. He finally revealed his prized sword, which he cherished greatly. Gwai, brimming with resolve, brandished his weapon as if ready to take on the entire Mongol army, declaring that the Mongols would no longer mock him. The Mongols were intimidated and puzzled by the unfamiliar metal of Gwai's sword, which they had never seen before. With his long saber, Gwai was completely confident in his ability to defeat the Mongols, but this did not deter the enemy from charging at him. The Mongols attacked aggressively, aiming to kill Gwai with their assault despite the unusual weapon he wielded. Gwai stood his ground, waiting for the perfect moment to strike and incapacitate the Mongol. The Mongol raised his sword, believing he could easily defeat Gwai and claim victory for himself. Gwai was determined not to yield, making a decisive move to strike and put an end to the Mongols' threats. He swung his long sword with precision, aiming to deliver a fatal blow to the Mongol's head. Gwai succeeded in hitting his target, causing the Mongol's body to fall and the horse to dash forward, kicking up a large cloud of dust with its speed. The powerful and precise strike from Gwai's sword easily sliced through the Mongol's head, showcasing the weapon's immense sharpness and strength. The Mongol stood frozen in the dark, paralyzed by the impact of the blow. Although being motionless seemed like the best option, the situation did not resolve that way. The old man, deeply troubled by the battle's outcome, ignored the pain from his arrow wound, focusing solely on the chaos around him. The girl, who had developed strong feelings for Gwai, was deeply concerned for him, fearing she might never see him again and cherishing the bond they had formed. Despite the inferno raging behind him, Gwai managed to escape with his weapon. Surviving such extreme conditions was a testament to his resilience. However, in his haste, Gwai twisted his ankle and could no longer put weight on his foot, adding to his suffering. In agony, Gwai collapsed to the ground, tears streaming down his face due to the pain and the poor condition of his shoes, which had contributed to his injury. His friend, who had assisted him, lay bleeding on the ground, a distressing sight that many would find difficult to endure. The bald Mongol was stunned by the turn of events, realizing that Gwai, who had once seemed like an insignificant assistant, was now a formidable adversary. The Mongol was now focused on his own survival, knowing he had yet to overcome Gwai, who was prepared to fight with all his strength. The provost's son, wielding his blade with skill, came close to finishing off the Mongol, showcasing the superior weapon his father had afforded him. The bald Mongol, recognizing the threat, had to move swiftly to avoid death, struggling to defend against the relentless attacks from the son. Despite his efforts, the Mongol struggled to withstand the son's onslaught, unprepared for the young warrior's exceptional combat skills. The provost's son sheathed his blade, having defeated another Mongol, demonstrating his prowess and determination, unlike his father who had fled. He stood at sunset, looking every bit the leader of the city, even though his father was officially in charge. His presence underscored his strength and capability. Meanwhile, Gwai remained on the ground, still in agony over his twisted ankle, unable to stop crying from the relentless pain. As night fell and the day ended, the weather improved and birds began to sing. The aftermath of the fierce battle was marked by a somber quiet. The girls clung to each other, mourning as they witnessed the death of one of their fathers, who had been killed by local authorities for keeping chickens. Dao Bi, amidst her grief, became distracted by something in the distance, her attention drawn to the broader scope of loss and devastation. She realized that many others had suffered similar fates, with numerous people having perished from the Mongol attacks. The mourners grieved for their loved ones, knowing the scars of such losses would remain with them forever. Dao Bi resolved to remain strong, understanding that she needed to be resilient and capable of defending herself in these trying times. Gwai's friend, now recovered, began collecting weapons, urging Gwai to hurry up and leave, as staying too long could result in severe consequences. Gwai, reflecting on his actions, realized for the first time what it meant to kill, feeling the weight of having taken lives, including that of the Mongol leader. He remembered how people had praised him as their warrior, grateful for his role in saving lives and protecting them. Gwai questioned whether he had fought well, but his friend, in a daze, struggled to provide a clear answer. He recalled the advice to stay out of others' conflicts, but wondered if his actions, despite their consequences, had ultimately been right. His friend pondered deeply, unable to offer a definitive answer, knowing that Gwai's actions had been impactful and would require reflection and atonement. He reassured Gwai that he had done the right thing, embracing him and affirming his role as a true friend and support during the toughest times. Despite the comfort, he urged Gwai to hurry, warning that their leader would punish them for any further delay, knowing the threat was serious. The townspeople gathered to eat after the calamity, finding solace in their unity despite the ongoing grief. Dao Bi busied herself distributing food to the injured, determined to support everyone and strengthen the community in its time of need. She served bowls of soup to the survivors, offering them nourishment to help cope with their suffering and the harsh experiences they had endured. Dao Bi noticed Gwai and called him to stay, her feelings for him evident even though she tried to conceal them. She offered him lunch as a token of gratitude for his help, recognizing his contributions despite his outsider status. Gwai's friend attempted to persuade him to leave quickly, fearing that staying any longer would bring punishment from their leader. Gwai sat on the floor, savoring the first bowl of soup, much to his friend's frustration, who was exasperated by Gwai's reluctance to hurry. Gwai expressed his enjoyment of the soup, finding pleasure in the simple meal that Dao Bi had prepared for him. Dao Bi, pleased that he enjoyed her soup, asked if he wanted more, feeling joy in his appreciation of her effort. As she fetched another bowl, she observed the villagers and realized the depth of their suffering from the Mongol attack. The bond between Dao Bi and Gwai seemed undeniable, hinting at mutual affection that transcended their dire circumstances. His older friend questioned whether Gwai had developed feelings for Dao Bi, noting how he looked at her as if she were the last woman on earth. His friends were making light-hearted comments, but Gwai insisted that he wasn't in love, just sympathetic as a decent person. Stories spread about Gwai's prowess in battle, with people claiming he had single-handedly defeated the Mongols. The praise flattered him, especially as it contrasted with the initial negative impressions people had of him. However, discussions shifted to the son of the provost, who was hailed as a greater hero for his role in defeating the chief and rescuing Gwai. The son of the provost was admired for his skill and leadership, contrasting sharply with Gwai's struggles and perceived shortcomings. Daobi brought another serving of food, hoping it would bring some relief to the weary survivors. Gwai, feeling overshadowed, challenged the young master to a fight, distressed that his valor was being undermined by others. He accused the young master of imprisoning the old man and insisted that if he had faced the bald Mongol, things would have been different. His friends urged him to leave quickly, noting his tendency to flee when danger approached and return when things settled. The girls were displeased with his attitude and remarks. The young master, annoyed by Gwai's arrogance, prepared to draw his sword, intending to show that his contributions were more valuable than Gwai's. Gwai was thrilled by the young master's readiness to fight, seeing it as a long-awaited chance to prove himself. Daobi, distressed by the ongoing conflict, felt torn between her people's recent suffering and the unnecessary rivalry brewing among her allies. Despite the tension, the blades didn't clash immediately, as Daobi's efforts to resolve the conflict highlighted the absurdity of the rivalry. Gwai, determined to challenge the son of the provost, began to swing his weapon, intent on defeating him despite the young master's battle-hardened skill. Suddenly, a projectile struck him, knocking out his teeth and leaving him struggling to remain upright from the force of the blow. Daobi intervened, urging him to stop and consider the village's situation instead of pursuing his personal pride. Overwhelmed by the behavior of the others, she left in tears, her feelings deeply hurt. Gwai, upset by her distress, tried to console her, realizing how much he cared for her. He chased after her, hoping she would listen and understand his need to restore his dignity, despite the importance of the fight. The young master sheathed his sword, recognizing that further conflict was inappropriate, given the village's fragile state after the recent war. Gwai's friend, frustrated by the mess Gwai had created, saw his actions as damaging to their reputation and progress. The old man summoned Gwai, preparing to question him about his actions and their consequences. Meanwhile, the villagers continued the somber task of burying their dead, casualties of the senseless conflict over the fortress. They carefully covered the graves with stones and earth, seeking to honor their lost loved ones and find some solace amidst their grief. As the old man placed the final stone, he felt the weight of his own solitude, reflecting on the loss of his loved ones. Daobi, sitting on a stone, watched the burial process, overwhelmed by sorrow as she mourned the dearly departed. Her tears flowed freely, her beautiful brown eyes reflecting the depth of her pain and loss. She heard footsteps behind her and hoped it was her friend come to comfort her. In reality, her friend was below, engaged in the solemn task of covering the graves, offering a final tribute to those who had passed. Daobi shared that, 5 years ago, after losing her parents and becoming an orphan, her parents' friends became her new family. She expressed her fear and confusion about how to live now, as losing another figure she saw as a parent brought her immense pain. Gwai invited her to his village, where he worked as a blacksmith and contributed to his community. Surprised by the offer and emotionally overwhelmed, Daobi was initially skeptical but began to consider the potential benefits. She explained that she couldn't leave without her friend and the villagers she cared for deeply. Gwai encouraged her to bring everyone along. Touched by his generosity, Daobi felt a renewed sense of hope and strength, believing that things might improve. The old man inquired about the strength of Gwai's village and its origins. Gwai began to answer but was cut off by the old man. The old man concluded that his village's support, including their weaponry, could help save the fortress. The old man asked if the village had weapons and skilled fighters. Gwai acknowledged the question but noted that his village was unique, making such help unlikely. Gwai emphasized 2 key rules: not interfering in others' problems and not allowing others to interfere in theirs. He insisted these rules were unchangeable for as long as they lived there, which disappointed the old man. Despite this, the people decided to follow Gwai to his village, believing that increased numbers would strengthen their position. Gwai's friend was alarmed by this decision, contradicting the rules he had just stated. With the sun shining and the weather improved from the previous day's conflict, birds flew nearby as people moved around. They had fled from the Changzhou fortress, which was teeming with people. They clustered together like ants at a single location. The Mongol leader sat in his chair, and his aide warned that everyone must heed his commands and comply with his orders, or they would face a dire fate. He remarked that their attempt to escape the previous night was foolish and would have severe repercussions. He added that they had even dared to kill a Mongol soldier who had come to bring peace to the region. Everyone reacted with horror at the situation, even though they knew they needed to deal with the Mongols to find peace. A second man stood up and asserted that such events should not have occurred. He claimed they were merely ordinary Scots with no real influence. The Mongols observed them and realized they had lost a soldier they valued highly, just as they valued all their comrades. They understood that they were facing severe trials ahead, which would likely be both painful and difficult to survive. A Mongolian, holding his child, thought it was necessary to teach these audacious people a lesson for killing one of their own. The king took the child into his arms, depriving the parents of their most cherished possession, as they had devoted all their effort to raising him. The king asked the child whether he loved his mother or father more. The boy, not understanding because he spoke Mongolian, made the old man pleased. He placed the child on the ground while the parents watched, realizing that a very harsh and painful fate awaited them. He told the boy he could leave, but the child, terrified and unsure of what to do, remained scared. The boy ran to his mother, calling out to her to quickly embrace him, as he loved her dearly and cherished her above all else. Before he could run, he saw large splashes of blood before him. Overwhelmed by pain and confusion, he didn't know how to react, being so small and inexperienced. A Mongol soldier had beheaded his mother, and his father, unable to control himself, screamed for them to stop. The Mongol king told the father to observe carefully, pointing out that the deaths were due to his actions. The baby cried uncontrollably, tears streaming down his face. The onlookers were deeply distressed, realizing that anyone who dared to escape would face a similar fate. The crowd, horrified by the Mongol king's brutality, shouted in protest as they watched the king coldly deal with the child's mother. The Mongol king summoned his loyal servant with a simple gesture, leaving the servant bewildered about his demands. The king spoke to the servant in Mongolian, causing him to become anxious and sweat as he turned red with worry. The servant shouted that the deaths were a result of the decision to flee, and as a consequence, everyone else was suffering. He attempted to incite a rebellion, pointing to the boy he blamed for the situation. The child, unable to comprehend, clung tightly to avoid falling. He warned that if this continued, it would result in the deaths of innocent people as well. The man, realizing his son was in imminent danger from the uncontrolled mob, understood that he might soon be overwhelmed and finished off. Reaching out to his child, he saw the boy continue to cry, now an orphan with his mother gone. The father was unable to reach his child because someone in a pink robe stopped him. It was the boy's grandmother who halted him with a puzzled expression, as if she had a solution to end the nightmare. The grandmother shouted at the Mongol, calling him a fool and worse than an animal for showing no mercy to an innocent child. Enraged, the grandmother declared that no one here would be willing to kill a child just to survive. Her statement surprised everyone with its intensity. She gathered the child in her arms and was supported by the women behind her, forming a small but determined group ready to resist. The men realized their lives were at risk and that they were likely to die because of the actions of a young man trying to escape with his parents. They knew it wasn't his fault. The Mongol king contemplated how to address the situation, recognizing that killing women who could potentially breed many new Mongols would be counterproductive. He turned and laughed, lamenting that the disruption had ruined the entertainment he had planned for himself. The servant wondered if everything could end so quickly, and if the village would finally experience some peace. The king ordered the execution of everyone, as their actions had spoiled his intended enjoyment. Despite having no other choice, he felt compelled to act. The soldiers began to slaughter ordinary civilians, showing no mercy even to pregnant women, killing everyone in their path. They were indifferent to whether the victims were women or elderly, simply following the orders given by their leader. Meanwhile, the king retreated to his hut to rest, displeased that his emotions had turned somber and that he missed the performance he had hoped to see. Inside his hut, he watched as the soldiers sharpened their weapons, enjoying the sight of his warriors becoming stronger. Although he observed the scene, he was still unsettled by the disturbance caused by the people he had to eliminate. When asked if he could repair his own sword, the Mongol leader replied that he could not, implying that someone else would handle the task for him. The worker, showing his ignorance, asked why he couldn't handle the task himself. The leader replied that that's what servants are for, calling him a fool in the process. He continued to sharpen the sword, emphasizing the importance of a well-maintained weapon for every battle. The servant mentioned that fighting was impossible without knowing the sword's condition. The king responded that if there was a problem, they could always return from war and execute the servant. He implied that the servant should stop complaining and stick to his duties, which the leader had assigned. When asked if everyone was dead, the leader confirmed it and stated that the conquest of the fortress was imminent. The servant inquired about who would repair the weapons and operate the catapult, a concern he had been pondering since the battle. The king was infuriated, unable to understand why he should now be responsible for weapon repairs, and felt insulted by the suggestion. The guards explained that there weren't enough people available, and they lacked the necessary physical strength for the task. The king was outraged, realizing that retaking the territory would be much more difficult than initially acquiring it. The assistant was instructed to bring people from the fortress within 3 days. The servant questioned why, arguing that failing to conquer the fortress would only result in having more slaves. He swung the sharpened sword, a risky move that could be interpreted as an attack on the king, risking execution by the guards. The sword struck him on the nose, causing blood to flow, but he remained calm and thoughtful. He was pleased that the sword was as sharp as before and appreciated the skill of the person who sharpened it. Leaving his quarters, he was satisfied with the sword's condition, although he found it quite expected. Meanwhile, the same servant overheard these discussions and revealed the king's plans to the public, including the intended execution of the child. He saw the old man emerge from the door and realized that if he were spotted, he would surely be reported and face death. He urgently needed a plan. The king noticed him and inquired about the issue. The servant explained that the reconnaissance team had not returned, which was a bad omen. The king named his top warriors, intending to give them orders to improve the dire situation. He instructed them to gather intelligence and bring thousands of people from the jungle fortress, emphasizing the need for labor for the nation. The old man was astonished by this request, finding it difficult to believe how they could bring 1,000 people at once. They quickly mounted their horses to recruit new people and recover their intelligence, who might already be dead due to other warriors. The leader commanded them to eliminate all rebels who could pose any threat. They understood the importance of their orders, knowing that failure to complete the task could mean being treated as if they had died without fulfilling their mission. Despite the pleasant weather and the extraordinary landscape, with the stream near Mount Yok flowing beautifully, the people were still hungry. The troops, exhausted from the recent war and a long march, were struggling with hunger and uncertainty about what lay ahead. Guai was extremely hungry and continued to eat whatever he could find, driven by an insatiable appetite. He asked if they would finish the food and, if not, requested that it be given to him due to his greed. The old man realized there was a village about 2 miles from the mountains and felt secure in such a remote area without worrying about external threats. He understood that what happened outside would not affect the village, making it a convenient and safe place for the residents. The guy explained that they were accompanying them as part of their war duties, but it was clear they were just trying to reach their destination, The old man, showing arrogance, demanded to be taken to the head of the village. The guy said he couldn't fulfill that request and advised the old man to turn around. Despite the old man's insistence, the guy reiterated that he couldn't take him to the village leader due to the rules, which prohibited such actions and risked his expulsion. The girls sensed something was amiss and became increasingly anxious about their future. Her friend noted that moving everyone would be ideal, though it was impossible. Daobi agreed, stating that they needed to start gathering resources and caring for the livestock. The girls remained apprehensive, but hoped things would turn out fine. If not, they knew they would have to endure hardship. Daobi continued to berate the guy who was eating, admonishing him for his calm demeanor while half the villagers awaited their aid. The village was still burning, and its inhabitants were trapped, unable to escape due to lack of strength and options. The fire raged uncontrollably, with no chance of extinguishing it without specialized equipment, which they lacked. The Mongols tied people to highly flammable trees, leading to their fiery deaths. As the Mongols moved on, they sought new lands and allies to help them achieve the king's goals. They hurried to recruit people, knowing that failure to complete the task would result in their own deaths. The lovers continued to argue, with the guy expressing frustration over his hunger. She offered him her food, saying he should eat since he was also hungry. Although he felt uncomfortable, he thanked her. Even though she gave away her food, she was also very hungry. She struggled to watch him eat what little she had, but her love for him outweighed her own needs. The girl asked about the nature of their surroundings, and the guy, finishing a piece of bread, explained that it was their village. Daobi clarified, asking about the environment around them. The guy described the surroundings as magnificent, expressing his enjoyment of the place each day. Just as he was about to eat, an arrow struck him, knocking the food from his hands and preventing him from finishing his meal. The sudden attack shocked everyone, causing panic as they realized they needed to flee quickly. It became clear that the Mongol army was pursuing them in retaliation for the deaths of the Mongols sent on reconnaissance. The old man instructed the residents to flee to the mountains for safety, emphasizing that their survival was crucial to the Mongols. While the girl and others escaped to the mountains, the 3 defenders were left to protect the village against the Mongols. 3 skilled fighters prepared to confront them. The girl noticed that Gwai remained behind, unwilling to retreat to the mountains, believing only he could stop the Mongols. She feared losing him. Gwai reassured her not to be afraid and drew his large katana, ready to defend against the Mongols. The 3 defenders stood their ground, preparing to face the Mongols who charged at them on horseback, each armed with a sword. One Mongol commander instructed another to circle around and hunt down the people the leader had ordered to be brought. The second Mongol accepted and moved out. As they moved aside, the 3 defenders continued to stand their ground, determined to resist the Mongols who were disrupting their lives. Guan noticed that some Mongols were attempting to flank them to capture more people. The old man instructed him to focus and prepare for battle instead of looking around. He brandished his large sword with both hands, ready to cut down any Mongols who came at him. A Mongol with long hair, following orders from the commander, charged towards him to buy time for others to escape. The Mongol engaged in battle with the old man, but was told to calm down and return quickly, or they risked losing their position. The guy insisted there was no time to waste and that they needed to act fast to prevent losing the people on the mountain. He successfully dispatched all the Mongols attacking him with his katana, which seemed almost miraculous in its effectiveness. Even the strongest Mongol, who had been sent to confront him, was knocked off his horse and incapacitated. However, he had only injured the horse, not the Mongol, who then prepared to fight back, showing a preference for horses over people. The guy, brimming with confidence, declared that he could handle the Mongols easily, showing disdain for their presence. This confidence puzzled the other guy who was preparing to confront him, not understanding why he was so self-assured. Meanwhile, the fleeing people raced to escape the dangers that awaited them if the Mongols caught up. One person stumbled and slowed down, causing everyone to halt and worry about each other, reinforcing their sense of unity. A Mongol threw a noose over a child's head while he was running with his parents, attempting to capture him. The child cried out for his mother to save him as the ruthless Mongol dragged him across the ground like a sack of food. The woman cried out for help, desperate to save her child, whom she had cared for tirelessly. Daobi saw that her friend had also been captured and felt compelled to act, as losing loved ones in such quick succession was unbearably painful. A realization struck her as she noticed someone arriving to meet her. Specifically, she saw the Mongols who had come to collect labor for weapon forging and other agricultural tasks. The old man and his friend fought valiantly, but knew that even their combined efforts couldn't overcome the sheer number of Mongols. The older friend informed the lieutenant general that he was injured, and the old man told him to stay focused or risk death. The friend responded that he was more than just a private. Gwai continued to battle the Mongol who had fallen from his horse. This Mongol had a distinctive forelock and long hair. As he fought, Gwai tried to recall something that seemed significant, when suddenly they heard a girl's scream. Distracted by the girl's presence among the ordinary people, Gwai lost focus on his fight with the Mongol. Overwhelmed by the situation, the girl screamed his name, realizing it might be their final encounter. The younger Mongol decided to advance, and the old man, respecting his superior rank, accepted the order without protest. Gwai, eager to end the conflict, charged at the seasoned Mongol, finding the opponent's skill formidable. The experienced Mongol used his knowledge to evade and counter Gwai's attacks. Gwai landed a powerful blow to the Mongol's stomach, overwhelming him with pain and making it impossible for him to defend against such a forceful strike. His friend was deeply concerned that V had been seriously injured and might bleed out, or that the Mongol could finish him off entirely. The Mongol aimed to decapitate him with a powerful swing of his massive sword. However, he was suddenly struck by an intense pain, causing him to close his eyes and struggle to see clearly. A sledgehammer seemed to materialize amidst a cloud of dust, obscuring everything around them. Confused, he couldn't comprehend what was happening, as he was sure he had defeated the young man and was close to overcoming his grandfather and friend. Through the dust, a man appeared like a cyborg, looking impressive and arriving just in time to help. His eyes gleamed with confidence, and he was known for his skill and reputation, which preceded him. This man was renowned as the head of the blacksmith business, famed for his unmatched prowess in dealing with Mongols. People marveled at how someone could throw a sledgehammer with such force over such a great distance. Behind the master, villagers had gathered to protect their people. The fat man was puzzled by how they had discovered their hidden location. Realizing he had nearly been defeated, he decided to retreat, a suggestion that was agreed upon by the other Mongols who couldn't oppose him. The Mongols prepared to retreat, thinking about how to manage their large number of people and avoid further losses. The villager urged them to fight back, accusing the Mongols of cowardice and stating that such behavior was unworthy of true warriors. The villagers saw that Gwai was in critical condition and nearly lifeless. The fat man requested the leader to return and continue the fight. The head of the blacksmith business realized that the trouble began with the man who brought the weapon, putting the village at risk. A villager approached Gwai and asked the head if he was dead. The old man reassured him, saying that Gwai was merely unconscious. The old man explained that Gwai had used his hand to block the sword's blow, which saved his life and only left him temporarily unconscious for his own safety. The head inquired about the condition of his leg and why he had given the weapon to him. The man replied that it was a long story and would need to be explained later. The villagers who had arrived after their village was burned began to suspect that the head of the village was involved in the situation. The old man introduced himself as a lieutenant general and commander of the Chengdu fortress. The village head realized that the old man would likely seek assistance, as no one visited their village without a purpose. He was not keen on this idea. The old man turned away without saying much, sensing that engaging in a lengthy discussion would bring significant drawbacks for the village. This irritated the mountain commander, who demanded that the old man speak to him properly, emphasizing their shared nationality. The old man asked why he was there and suggested that they discuss the matter privately, as it was not suitable for a public conversation. The man advised the head to follow him, indicating that it would be best to avoid angering the old man further. He ran ahead, instructing the others to wait. The old man knew that if he did not establish contact soon, gaining their cooperation might be difficult. The commander-in-chief realized he would have to handle things on his own, likely without help from the villagers after their cold reception. The village was situated on Mount York, a remote location rarely visited, where reaching it was considered a significant achievement. The old man arrived, visibly exhausted. He reached a specific location and asked if this was the right place. The guide explained that there had once been a temple here, but now it was occupied by them, as everyone who had served in the temple had fled. The old man remarked that his own village wasn't so hidden, but the guide assured him there were no lunatics who would try to invade. The guide mentioned that it was an honor, as they had lived in the village for a long time. Foreigners had not visited their village in over 30 years, and the master presented them with a gift as a token of appreciation for allowing them in. The villagers looked at the gift as though it were a museum exhibit, as they were accustomed to seeing only familiar faces and had little to excite them. Despite the unusual activity, the village thrived. People worked diligently, and the village's prosperity contributed to improving the world around it. Villagers busily sharpened weapons but continued to eye the newcomers warily, adhering to their village's rules. The old man found the atmosphere peculiar, noting that the villagers' intense scrutiny and apparent joy at the arrival of potential new residents was unusual. He remained puzzled by the strange and mysterious nature of the place. The village was encircled by trees and small, cozy houses, creating a secluded and picturesque environment. Surrounded by forests and lakes, the village was isolated, and the people worked diligently within this enclosed space. The old man suggested they move inside to discuss matters privately, away from prying ears. Meanwhile, Gwai, having regained consciousness, lay in the lake. He had been severely beaten by the Mongol before and struggled to pull himself out of the water. He barely managed to escape from the lake, feeling as though he was on the brink of drowning after ingesting a significant amount of water. Gwai overheard someone referring to him as a foolish idiot, blaming him for the many troubles that had befallen the head. The same overweight man criticized Gwai, suggesting that he had enjoyed himself without considering the consequences of his actions. Gwai, frustrated and confused, worried about Dao, whom he cared for deeply, and inquired about the whereabouts of the Mongols. They started to help him, lifting him by his limbs and giving him a brief welcome while he had been enjoying himself. During this time, everyone else continued working for the village's benefit. Suddenly, Gwai managed to push them away and told them to be quiet, though their irritation with him was apparent due to their jealousy. He insisted on saving the girl, emphasizing that his predicament in the village was a result of his desire to protect her. His friends were astonished and puzzled by his intense need to rescue the girl and his apparent agitation in their presence. Meanwhile, the old man was in a private discussion with the head, addressing important matters that were not meant for public knowledge, though people still watched. The commander-in-chief urged that they should seek their assistance in freeing Chengdu Fortress, but the old man refused. This refusal disappointed the commander-in-chief, who remarked that they would fail to honor their noble heritage if they refused to aid their kin. The blacksmith's head countered that offering their weapons at such a time would lead to their expulsion from all their stations, but the old man was unclear about this and suggested asking the general for clarification. The old man also conveyed a crucial point to the commander-in-chief, which was unwelcome to hear. The head of the blacksmith's business expressed reluctance to see them, but the second wise grandfather was confused about the implication of this. The head of the blacksmith's business told the lieutenant general that he could stay the night, but should then return to his origin. The lieutenant general declined the offer, stating he was in a hurry and needed to leave immediately. The old man wished him well on his journey. The residents were intrigued by the conversation, sensing it could lead to troubling consequences for their future. The old man was also aware of this. Gwai was bombarded with questions from everyone, inquiring about Dao, how he had arrived in the village, and how he had killed someone, among other things. Overwhelmed by the questions, Guai withdrew from the conversation as the inquiries only frustrated him. The others also expressed their discontent. The overweight man mentioned that they would accompany him to prevent similar issues from happening to them and assist with the situation. Despite their reluctance to help and their desire to see Guai fail, Guai told them to be quiet, stating that their presence was irrelevant to him. He emphasized the urgency of saving the girl who had been kidnapped, but suddenly, someone questioned him about what actions he should take. His friend pointed out that without permission from the blacksmiths group, leaving the village was equivalent to being expelled. The villagers criticized Guai, calling him a fool, but he told them to be quiet and instructed them to remove the dam. Guai realized that leaving the village without the head's permission would be challenging and began contemplating his options. An idea struck him, and a smile formed on his face as he devised a plan. The old man left the village, knowing he wouldn't get any assistance there, and continued on as the Mongols were approaching the main fortress. He recalled the provost's son mentioning that they had managed to bolster the army for the fight. The old man started considering his plans for when he returned. Suddenly, he saw that same large sword right in front of him. A large group of people appeared, offering to accompany him to protect the fortress from the Mongols and ensure their own safety. Meanwhile, the village was engulfed in flames, and its people were perishing. The land was thoroughly ravaged and destroyed. Mongol soldiers continued to slaughter ordinary people with the weapons they had acquired through their own forces. Dao Bi and his friend were together, noticing something approaching that might offer them a chance to survive.